Reddit, have you ever saved someone's life? I just found out I apparently did. I was in Hong Kong on business, so my colleague and I went to Repulse Bay. We met up with some girls we'd previously met, drank all day on the beach, hung out, made new friends, and we're all hitting a volleyball when a guy our age, early 20s, comes up to us, his voice in a panic saying his friend is buried and they can't get him out of the sand. I immediately thought this was some prank. So we go over to the kid and literally all you can see is an arm sticking out of the sand, so we try pulling it and all you can hear is a muffled scream. When we realized what's going on and tried to get closer, the sand caved in and the arm began frantically waving in a panic. Immediately I started digging in the sand with 4 other people to find this kid's head, and then I found it and we dug a small air pocket around his mouth. After about 5 minutes of carefully digging and pulling, we pulled him out. The beach was empty aside from us and it was getting pitch black out. Kind of crazy I saved some kid's life in Hong Kong. Waiting for the bus. Random guy wearing sunglasses also waiting for the bus leans over the curb to look to see if the bus is coming. Randomly collapses. So I run into the street where he collapsed and stop cars from running over him and ask him if he is okay. Call the cops. And turns out that he was a veteran and he got a blast from a grenade several tears ago. Has to take meds to help with his migraines. HR blacks out randomly. TLDR. Saved a veteran that blacks out randomly from getting ran over on a busy intersection. No one commented on yours, so I felt bad. Good job. I've almost blacked out myself a few times. It's pretty scary. Good to know nice people like you are around. This July I was in an airport at the top of an escalator where a woman was trying to deal with her luggage, a baby in a stroller, and a toddler. Her toddler slipped right before they got on the escalator and without thinking she reached for him and, in doing so, let go of the baby stroller that was halfway onto the top stair of the escalator. The stroller started to tilt downward and when I realized it was about to completely tip over, I dropped my own luggage, grabbed it and brought it back up to the landing. No idea if I actually saved the kid's life, but the escalator was empty, so I imagine it would have fallen all the way down. This is why there are all those signs that say don't take strollers on escalators. Maybe, but it was part of my job. Nothing all crazy and sentimental like these others though. I was a camp legion, in the field doing all this military training for circumstances we were never in. It was late in June and it was something like 99-100 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity in the 90s as well. Since Legion is essentially a gigantic swamp, hydration was always important. Now, the guys in my squad of engineers were great, never had any issues from them. But we got downrange doing a dry run. No blanks, no ammo of any sort, and my guys and myself had done our part and were running to the rendezvous point. Now, just for perspective, we were doing this with weapons and crap, like the 60-ish pound flak jacket. With all 4 ceramic plates there were no crap like 60 pounds, assorted packs and whatever. So most guys were working with at least 80-100 pounds of gear. As we're running I hear some shouting of Corman, Doc, and I'm just thinking damn it, we're really gonna have a mock casualty now. Nope. Kid was stumbling around, had no idea what the frick he was doing or where he was. Pupils about the size of the tip of a pen. So I do my thing. Pull all his stuff off, ice packs in armpits and groin, water to cool him down, etc. While all of this was going on, I was shouting instructions to the Marines in my squad and dealing with another heat case who was considerably less severe. Took his gear, gave him a camelback and ice packs and he was able to walk back to the staging area. That was actually the first time since I'd gotten to Legion that I really had to take charge and handle multiple problems at once. I was very pleased with how well my Marines did in helping me manage everything. By the time the corpsman for the platoon those 2 guys were from God there we'd already called for a truck and higher level medical intervention. Once everything was done and over with, found out he had a temp of over 103F and had we not intervened, it would have escalated to heat stroke and he probably would have died. So remember kids, hydrate. That right there is a heck of a job interview answer. Maybe. I had plans with a friend and he didn't show up. We called him a bunch, and when he finally called back, he said he didn't feel too well, wasn't going out, whatever, no big deal. He did say I love you a bunch when we hung up, which was also no big deal. We're all a bunch of mushpits. So fast forward to what I thought was the end of my night. I was wasting time on Facebook, and his status was really off. It was sentimental and not funny, and it just struck me as weird. So, I called his phone a couple of times, and resolved to just ride my bike to his house to make sure he was okay. It was about 4 AM. I thought what I was doing was just kind of silly and overly neurotic, but I'm kind of obsessive and I figured it would be worth waking him up for. Well, he called me back and I told him why I wanted to make sure he was okay. It turned out he was really fricked up and was pondering sort of attempting suicide. So I went over and bought him a pizza instead. It was terrifying. He was pretty shocked that I knew something was off, but we're buddies. I just knew something was off. TLDR. Friend's tone was off. Accidentally realized he was going to suicide himself. We had pizza instead. That's an awesome story. I hope you stay in touch with him. My own story is kinda mundane, but I did get a monkey out of it. I was 11. It was probably a 4th of July picnic at my aunt's house. Around dusk, when the adults were all eating on the porch, and the kids were scattered who knows where, I was walking across the backyard to get something to eat. As I passed the pool, I saw a small body floating in it. I remember starting to take one of my Velvet Mary jeans off, my favorite shoes ever, before I realized I was being stupid and jumped in. It was my 20-month-old cousin. Somehow he had crawled up the ladder and fell in. Cousin saved. Yada yada. So, my grandma told me she would get me anything I wanted, and my stupid 11-year self said I want a monkey. Sure enough, a few weeks later, she brought me a monkey. I had forgotten all about it by that time. It was a spider monkey. I guess I was thinking more like chimp. Nastiest thing ever. My dad built huge cage for it in the garage. I tried to make friends with Kiki, but he still bit the crap out of me. We donated it, cage and all, to a local nature center when it got cold. No regrets. Not being a native speaker of English, I first thought getting a monkey out of it was a thing. A buddy of mine and I were stationed in Hawaii. We were trying to learn how to surf, cause we were new on the island and didn't know how much of an ass kicking it was going to be. I'm 6 feet 1 inches and about 220, so it was probably just awkward to watch. Anyway, I had just gotten my butt handed to me by another wave when I look over and see this guy and a young girl pop up out of the water about 40 feet away. He looks right at me and then just shouts help, really monotonously. I start swimming toward them and watch as a wave rolls in and the water level behind them recedes, creating this big bowl of rock that the wave would slam into, settle, and recede again. It was basically a big horse show facing north that water would just spin cycle against. As soon as you came above water again and started trying to get away, another wave came in to push you back down, and I was swimming right into it. Fuck. I finally reach them and slam my board into this guy and tell him to get to the rocks. I grab his kid as he paddles away. I see my buddy running along the rocks to grab him, and the first wave slams me under. I just held the girl over my head and started kicking. I made a little progress toward the rocks before it happened again. This time, I was bounced off the rocks, and the wind just left me. I paddled again and got her above water, but I had taken a bit longer. As soon as I broke the surface, I saw the next wave. I turned and saw my buddy. I just remember that he looked scared. I screamed catch her and chucked her like a shot put as the momentum of the water surged me forward. He caught her, and I fell. I had the presence of mind to turn, so that my back slammed into the rock and coral, and I was run against it like I was a piece of cheese run along a grater with a fire hose. I genuinely didn't think I was gonna make it that last time. Just before I blacked out, I felt the rocks, and I clambered up them. My buddy grabbed my shorts, and I was out. I never got their names. The father just said thanks, as was laying down, bleeding all over the sand. He grabbed his daughter by the arm and dragged her back to their spot on the beach. My buddy bought her an ice cream, and we left. It was actually as awkward as it was anticlimactic, now that I type it. Not me, but a friend of mine gave the Heimlich to a buddy in the middle of a Taco Bell after he tried to deep throat a burrito. This is beyond touching. I indirectly saved a woman's life after she wandered into my store and began stumbling around. At first I thought she was just drunk, mumbling to herself, but I made out 3 words: insulin, blood sugar, before she completely crashed headfirst into the candy racks. I called the EMTs and they showed up in about 3 minutes. Gave her a shot of something to stabilize her, then carted her off to the hospital. One of the cops who responded to the initial call came by later that day to tell me if I hadn't heard the insulin part and alerted the EMTs to it, she could have gone into severe shock and died. I'm not quite sure, but I like to think that I saved my sister's life. I didn't save it in the literal sense. My sister had depression her junior year of high school and attempted suicide multiple times. She was basically institutionalized, but in a hospital, not a ward. A ward for depressed kids who needed help but wasn't a mental institute, if that makes sense. She wasn't getting any better with therapy or anything. They had to make sure there were not sharp objects, keep a close watch, etc. I didn't see her for about 6 months. My parents basically put her in a hospital because they couldn't trust her at home. I was 13 or 14, and I didn't know too much about what was going on. The family therapy was the 3 of them. A lot of the issues with her depression stemmed from the relationship with our parents, and they just weren't getting through to her. I mean, how can you after years of perceived bulls? So this was happening outside my reality. I still went to school, did my homework, etc. My sister and I never had the closest relationship, but I knew she was seriously fricked up, on the verge of being institutionalized. So I wrote her a letter, telling her how much I loved her and how much I missed her, and how much she meant to me and the family. After that letter, there was like a total turnaround, like within a week or 2. Only once she told me how much reading that letter meant to me, and it seemed to me like everything was different after that. Just total turnaround. Maybe I just want to think I really made a difference, but she was on the path to being institutionalized, but then she came home. So I feel I saved her, reaching out to her in a way that our parents couldn't. Maybe I'm wrong and it meant nothing, but I like to think it did. TLDL. I feel I wrote a letter that helped my sister overcome depression and avoid being institutionalized. You did the best freaking thing anyone could have done to help her. It means a heck of a lot more than you think. You saved her life, man. Not me, but my ex-GF had something similar happen. She was a breakfast regular at a restaurant and made a point to talk to one server on a regular basis, asked him how he was doing, etc. One morning he wasn't her server, but she made an effort to talk to him anyway and didn't think anything of it. About a year later he was leaving for another job and waited for her to come in so he could say goodbye. He then thanked her for talking to him that particular day, because he was planning to kill himself after work and he realized she'd actually be sad if that happened, and so he didn't do it. It's stories like these that make me realize that people can go about their everyday life and not realize the impact they have on someone's life. My friend had never been swimming before, ever, so when a group of friends and I went to a river to hang out for an hour or so, I taught my friend a quick version of doggy paddling and quickly how to float on his back. I also showed him where the bank cut out, aka where he wouldn't be able to safely stand. We're swimming, having a good time, and he's got the hang of it, but then he floats on his back for too long and slowly gets dragged out past the bank and into the current. I shouted his name to get his attention, and once he realized he couldn't stand he began to freak out, splashing and flailing and screaming, and soon he went underwater. The first girl closest to him immediately went down under to save him, but he was in such a state of panic that he began pushing her down in an attempt to get air. After 15 or so seconds of this, the girl came back up for air for herself. I watched him go under again, and the water flattened out. I was next closest. I saw what he'd done to the girl, so I took in the biggest breath I could and prepared to get thrashed. I dove down and scrambled to find him, and once I grabbed him he shoved me down to try to get his own air. I was swimming as hard as I could to get him back to where he could stand. He wasn't making it easy. He was wildly swinging his limbs around and kicking me so hard. It took about 2 whole minutes to get to a point where I knew we were out of the current. Once we could stand, he sprinted out of the water and curled up in his own little cocoon, coughing and taking in huge gulps of air. Everyone was so relieved. There's a second part to the story. I had just lost a bunch of weight, and my class ring had fallen off of my finger in this struggle. I figured it was a lost cause and that I'd never see it again. A whole 4 months later I get a call from an ex's mother. My ex's little sister was at a banquet at the river and a man had come up to her asking if she knew someone by my name who had graduated the year I did. His son was diving in the river and found my ring. I got it back. Karma is real. TLDR. I saved a friend from drowning in a river, lost her ring in the process. Reap the karma when I got it back 4 months later. You're precious. I saved my mother's life a few years ago. We were in a bad car crash. She broke 16 bones and punctured a lung. I secured her head so she could breathe more easily. She was being suffocated by the steering wheel, and I managed to stop most of the bleeding from her right leg. Open femur fracture. It felt like years before the ambulance came, and my now fiancé was in the backseat with a broken back. I talked him out of crawling through a broken window and calmed him down, which is no small achievement if you know him. The paramedics visited me in the hospital the day after, telling me what difference I made. It made a really horrible situation a small bit better. My sister has. She was walking to class and she passed a kid sitting in his car looking to be asleep, but he didn't look okay. She tapped on the window, but no response. She called 911. Once the cops and an ambulance arrived, she had to get to class. The cop who first reported to the scene called to tell her that the kid had OD'd and would have died if she hadn't called them when she did. She's awesome and my hero. Not just for her actions on that day, but she is a social worker and does amazing things every day. Good work. It's a great feeling. I pulled a guy out of a burning trailer once. He was burned badly and I wound up covered in his blood and skin. Not fun for the hour drive home to change clothes. I also spotted a pretty large shark cruising in the waves down the beach one day and got a lady out of its path. I don't know if it would have killed or even attacked her, but better to not find out. I noticed the signs of a concussion in a friend's wife who had fallen down and forced her to go to the hospital. Doctor said if she hadn't received treatment she might have died. For me, it is my current girlfriend. One day I was skimming through my contacts and found her name. Realizing that I haven't talked to her in a super long time. She moved to a different state a while back. I decided to text her and see how she's doing. So we texted for a few hours, with everything seeming pretty normal. After we were done texting, I called her and talked for another hour or so, catching up on each other's lives. This talking went on over a period of around 2 months, with our friendship growing every day. One day, she told me the truth about her life. She said that the exact day I texted her, she was thinking of ending her life. She was put into a depressive and suicidal state from her boyfriend dying tragically on her birthday a few months before we started talking. Parents who didn't care, constant bullying, rumors spread, and some other smaller things. Basically, I kept her from killing herself and let her know that people cared about her. I also had no idea she was in that state, so I saved her life without realizing it. We've been in a long distance relationship for exactly 6 months yesterday, and I love her more than anything in the world. Chugging wine with some friends at a lake years ago, watching a kid swim out too far, then not seeing him anymore. As realization set in, my friend ran out there first, dove into the water, and I was about 45 seconds behind. I hesitated. We both swam out to the center of the lake and he pulled the kid up. I swam alongside him, helping him drag the kid back to shore. The kid's family watched as my friend pumped his chest, choked on water and came back. It was a Mother's Day I never forget. The family didn't even thank us. Well done, but I bet you they've wanted to thank you guys ever since. It would have just been the stress. I was a lifeguard and pulled a 2-year-old off the bottom of a 12 featuring well. I guess that counts. A person is a person, no matter how small. Okay, I gave you your dang up vote. Now tell me a story. A few times, actually, all indirectly though. 1. Witness a horrible accident while driving on a country road with my father. I called 911 while he ran to the wreckage to try and help. We continued to help while police ambulance's helicopter came. Turns out 2/3 of the people in the accident went to my school, albeit one of the 2 students died in the hospital. I always felt weird walking around the hallway, seeing the other one, and thinking that I somehow helped in their living. 2. A friend from years ago that I kept in contact with every once in a while was posting some pretty depressing statuses on Facebook that eventually led to a goodbye type post. I had tried to text them with no response, so I called the police in their area with the little information I had, phone number and city of residence, and police got to them in time. 1 year later, I got a very emotional message thanking me for what I did. Tears were shed. 3. A friend of a friend was in my college apartment. They were just broken up with and had turned to mixing alcohol and prescription drugs. I was at the library at the time, but when I got home I found my one friend looking a bit frazzled and the acquaintance passed out on the couch. The friend didn't know what to do, so I promptly called 911. They were taken to the hospital and had their stomach pumped or something. I have no idea. Full recovery though. Crap like this only reaffirms my childhood dream of finding a job I love that involves helping people. Cheesy, I know. I've since maintained CPR read certification and am now looking into EMS training or something similar. Was really into Parker during my college years in Virginia Tech. Talked a lot about it to my friends. Used to show off at every chance I got. One of my friends happened to be in one of the classrooms on the 16th of April, 2007. Head gunshots and jumping out the window 2 stories up. Broke his leg, but lived. Later on he told me that he did it because he asked himself what would I do in that situation, and it seemed like the obvious choice. That's pretty badass. I was skateboarding home from my university 2 years ago and I thought I saw a woman struggling to push her car into a parking lot. Thought it had died on her. Had a small internal conflict whether to help or not. Decided to stop and ask if she needed help. Turns out she was choking. 7 seconds later I saved her life. Kind of. When I was 11, I was standing in the entryway of my friend's house waiting for her to leave with me, as her toddler-age brother played on the 2nd floor banister above me. She had a big house, and the ledge that her brother was dangling his various limbs from was very high up. Literally out of nowhere, I see a large mass falling from my peripheral vision. I dove towards it at the last second as I realized that it was her brother falling. I ended up with whiplash from him landing on my neck and knocking me down, and he was screaming and crying for about an hour. But at least he didn't meet the wood floor head first. He is 13 now and occasionally tells this story. Good on you, dude. Wood floors are expensive. Seriously, thank you. So I always donated blood but never thought about it. One day I got a call from the blood bank. They invited me to a special event to meet a little girl whom I and a few others' blood went into during a transfusion for this girl. That was a great experience and she was presented with a shirt with our names on it of who helped save her. Sometimes when I feel down, I try to remember, hey, I'm not that bad of a person to someone. I am a name on her shirt. I am honestly proud I've saved many lives. In my spare time, I admin an advice blog for people with mental illness, self-harm issues or suicidal thoughts. I couldn't even try to count the individual times I've stopped someone from committing suicide or succeeding in their attempt, but one occasion always sticks out. I was talking to this girl from Germany who had just attempted and was bleeding profusely for a while. By the time I rang her, she wasn't able to stand up. She could just talk and was able to call the ambulance before passing out about 2 minutes later. She told me about a week later that my advice and help saved her life beyond a shadow of a doubt. I can't deny it, saving someone's life is the best feeling in the world. So yeah, that's my little story of how I saved someone's life. I'm on my phone so I'll keep it quick. Walking back from work fairly late at night, age 16. Learning about the bystander effect at college. See 3 guys beating a small guy with bats. Puffed myself up, took action and charged. Guy suffered from brain damage and was put in an induced coma. Police told me one more hit to the head and he was a dead man. They took everything of his that night. Went from a bank worker to full-time McDonald's employee. Did feel slow motion dive to a friend that stepped out in front of a car after contemplating suicide. Found my girlfriend's friend passed out and choking on her own sick at a crappy party. Stomach pump. I turned 20 this December. The night I scared the muges off and I got taken home by the police was the only night I have seen my mother proud of me in my whole life. I bet your mother is proud of you for other things, maybe even for being you. Sometimes us parents just forget to say it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.